When his mother-in-law poured something odd into his drink, thinking he wasn't watching, Ezra noticed a special cocktail for my favorite son-in-law. She chirped with an unsettling smile. He smiled back, said thank you, and casually switched glasses with her husband, Martin, a man who never missed a chance to belittle his profession. 45 minutes later, Ezra Blake, a 32-year-old freelance photographer from Sedona, Arizona, sat quietly at the edge of the family room, his thoughts spiraling. He had built his business from scratch. Weddings, wildlife, editorial spreads, whatever paid the bills, and he was good at it. Very good. But to his wife's parents, especially Lorraine, it had never been enough. "How's that little photo hobby of yours going?" Martin would snort at Sunday dinners, disdain dripping from every word. Martin was a retired corporate consultant, a man who equated success with corner offices and mutual fund returns. Every Sunday at their Spanish-style home felt like a performance. Lorraine would fuss over her daughter and Martin would grill Ezra on his income like it was an audit. Ezra's wife Tessa would quietly squeeze his hand under the table, a silent apology for her family's coldness. That week, Ezra had just returned from a National Geographic assignment in Alaska, trudging through snowdrifts to capture caribou migration in freezing dawn light. He was drained, but Tessa had begged him not to skip her mother's birthday dinner. "It's just a few hours," she'd woe. He should have trusted the unease gnawing at him when Lorraine cornered him in the kitchen. The way her eyes scanned the hallway before handing him the glass. The faint tremble in her fingers as she said, "Made it especially for you." Something was off, but he had no idea just how off it was going. Ezra had met Tessa 6 years ago at a local gallery opening, where his landscape photos had caught the eye of every visitor. She had just completed her master's in marine biology, and he was on the verge of becoming recognized. Their connection was instant. She saw the world he chased through his lens, and he was in awe of the world she tried to save. Her parents, however, had never approved. Martin had made it crystal clear from day one that he expected someone different, a man with a 401k, a leather briefcase, and a schedule full of business lunches. Someone just like him. Lorraine was more subtle. She'd compliment Ezra's photographs before asking when he planned to find something a little more permanent. She would invite him into holidays, then introduce him as Tessa's photographer friend instead of her son-in-law. Ezra had spent years trying to earn their approval. He brought rare wines to dinner, showed off magazine covers with his name dropped, celebrity clients. Nothing worked. To them, he was just a passing phase in their daughter's otherwise well-planned life. To Lorraine, Ezra had always seemed like a phase her daughter would eventually outgrow. Just last Christmas, he overheard her on the phone. Tessa could have married Nathan, the orthopedic surgeon with a trust fund, but she chose the creative one. The way she lingered on the word creative made it sound like a chronic illness. Martin, as always, was less subtle. When Ezra and Tessa had shared the news they were trying for a baby, Martin had pulled him aside. "Kids are costly, son. Might want to consider real work before adding another mouth to feed." Ezra never told Tessa. She loved her parents despite their many shortcomings, and he didn't want to put her in the middle. So he gritted his teeth, smiled through dinners, complimented Lorraine's cooking, and played the polite son-in-law. But looking back, there had been signs, clear, glaring ones that he had willfully ignored. There was the way Lorraine would pull Tessa into the kitchen every time Ezra brought up a big client or photo spread, the way she'd forget to include him in family group shots, or the time Martin suggested therapy for Tessa's impulsive choices while locking eyes with Ezra across the table. He'd chalked it all up to generational differences. He'd believed time would change things, that with patience and quiet endurance, they would learn to respect him. He'd been very wrong. That Friday, the night of Lorraine's birthday dinner, Ezra had returned from Alaska with wind-chapped cheeks and a memory card full of caribou photos that would cover their mortgage for the next 3 months. He was dead tired, but he showered and ironed a shirt and drove with Tessa to her parents' colonial-style home, nestled in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. Dinner began as usual. Martin recounted a recent investment he made with unnecessary flair. Lorraine fussed over the napkins and centerpieces. Tessa's brother Miles and his wife Camille offered surface-level conversation and practiced smiles. Ezra drank a beer in silence, counting down the minutes until they could leave. After the main course, Lorraine cheerfully announced she had made her famous sangria for dessert. She disappeared into the kitchen, and Ezra followed a few moments later, offering to help with the glasses. That's when he saw it. 2 glasses had been set apart from the rest. As he stepped inside, Lorraine quickly poured something from a tiny glass vial into one of them. Whatever it wasn't garnish or fruit extract. It was clear, odorless, and the moment she noticed him, she tucked the vial away inside her cardigan. "Oh, Ezra, don't worry about these," she said a little too quickly. This one's for you. Special recipe for my favorite son-in-law. His throat tightened. Floating just beneath the surface of the drink was a thin, almost invisible sheen that shimmered when it caught the light. Let me help carry these, he said calmly, lifting the two glasses she had prepared. Back in the dining room. Martin was on his phone, barely acknowledging Ezra's return. Sangria, sir, Ezra said, placing the tampered glass gently in front of his father-in-law and sitting down with the other. Ezra watched as Martin took a generous sip while he casually explained he preferred water with dessert. 45 minutes later, Martin had gone pale. Beads of sweat lined his forehead, and he abruptly excused himself, stumbling toward the bathroom. The harsh guttural sounds of vomiting echoed through the otherwise pristine home. Lorraine's face turned ashen the moment realization struck. Her gaze locked with Ezra's from across the table. And in that split second, two truths settled into place with chilling clarity. Lorraine had tried to drug him, and she knew he knew Ezra didn't flinch, didn't speak. He calmly ate his chocolate cake while Tessa rushed to check on her father. Chaos unfolded quickly. Martin blamed spoiled seafood. Lorraine stammered something about bad oysters. Ezra quietly and unnoticed slipped the untouched glass meant for him into his bag. But something fundamental had shifted. The rage he felt wasn't loud or explosive. It was icy, intentional, calculated. He wouldn't lash out, wouldn't scream or make a scene. He was going to make them look at themselves and not be able to look away. That Monday, Ezra visited Jason, the owner of a private toxicology lab and a former client he had once photographed for a health magazine feature. Personal or professional, Jason asked, curious as Ezra handed over the glass. Family matter, Ezra replied, clipped and cold. 3 days later, Jason called back Ezra. That glass contained benzodiazepines. Nothing fatal, but a high enough dose to sedate someone for hours. Possibly memory impairment. Where did you even get this? Ezra thanked him and asked for a full written report. He didn't answer the question. That night, he told Tessa he needed to skip the next few Sunday dinners, claimed he was preparing for a photography exhibit and needed the extra time. She looked disappointed but nodded. He didn't tell her about the test results. Not yet. Instead, he began to dig. In less than 2 weeks, Ezra found that Lorraine had filled prescriptions for Xanax from 3 separate doctors. Her dosages had doubled over the years. Quiet whispers around town painted an even darker picture. Erratic behavior at a block party, rumors of theft at the golf club, awkward scenes that her family had quietly buried. Ezra gathered everything, printed it, filed it, waited. His opportunity came when Tessa mentioned that her mother wanted new headshots for her online social media profile. She specifically asked if you'd be the one to take them, Tessa said, eyes wide with disbelief. Ezra simply nodded. Of course, that Saturday he arrived at the house alone, his camera bag slung over one shoulder, a sealed envelope in the other. Lorraine was waiting, dressed in designer beige makeup, immaculate nerves masked behind forced elegance. Martin's at the office, she said smoothly. Before lifting his camera, Ezra held out the envelope. I thought you might want to see this first. She took it with hesitant hands. Her fingers shook as she unfolded the toxicology report and the copies of her multiple prescriptions. Her breath caught, her lips parted. But Ezra said nothing. He didn't need to. This is ridiculous, Lorraine whispered, her voice brittle. I would never. We both know what happened. Ezra cut in calm but firm. What I don't know is why. Her expression hardened, all pretenses slipping away. You're not good enough for my daughter, she hissed. You never were. A man should offer stability, not pictures and drugging your son-in-law. Does that count as stability? Ezra's voice was still even cold. It wasn't going to hurt you, she snapped. Just make you sick. Just enough to make you miss that pathetic gallery event you keep talking about. Show Tessa that you're unreliable. Ezra let her words hang in the silence, heavy and ugly. Here's what happens next, he said quietly. You're going to tell Martin what you did. Then you're both going to treat me with respect, not because you've had a change of heart, but because the alternative is Tessa finding out exactly who her parents are. Lorraine laughed, a short, hollow sound. She'll never believe you. Over us? Ezra reached for his camera bag. Maybe not, but she'll believe a toxicology report. She'll believe the prescription records. And she'll believe the stories your neighbors have whispered about you for years. Are you really willing to bet your relationship with your daughter on that? He walked out without taking a single photo. That night, Lorraine called Tessa in tears. She claimed Ezra had behaved inappropriately during their photo session. Hostile, aggressive, even threatening. When Tessa confronted him, Ezra knew he couldn't hide the truth any longer. He showed her everything. The lab results, the overlapping prescriptions, the progressively hostile texts Lorraine had sent him over the years. Tessa kept whispering, "She wouldn't do this. My mother wouldn't." But her voice was hollow. The certainty drained from it. The next day, Tessa confronted her parents. Ezra wasn't there, but when she came home, her eyes were swollen and red. "My father says it's a misunderstanding," she murmured, "that you're just insecure about your career, that you're trying to cause a rift between me and my family." Ezra didn't argue. He had expected as much. "What do you think?" he asked quietly. Tessa didn't respond. She simply turned off the light, climbed into bed, and faced away from him. Ezra had finally pushed back, but it felt like he'd only fallen deeper into their narrative. Now he was the problem, the manipulator, the threat. They had planted seeds of doubt in the only person whose opinion truly mattered to him. For 2 weeks, Tessa barely spoke to him. She visited her parents alone, returning with fresh tears and deeper uncertainty. Ezra poured himself into his work, staying late in the studio, letting the silence between them stretch into something heavy and unbearable. Then one afternoon, a package arrived. No return address, just his name, written in a hand he didn't recognize. Inside was a USB drive and a single note. "You should see this." And Camille Miles's wife, Ezra, plugged the drive into his laptop. It contained a series of video files, security footage from Lorraine and Martin's house. The timestamps matched the night of the birthday dinner. There was Lorraine clearly pouring something into a wine glass in the kitchen. Then Ezra appeared, entering the room, picking up the drinks, then Martin drinking from the altered glass. But the footage didn't end there. More clips followed, filmed after the guests had left. Lorraine screaming at Martin, her voice shrill and panicked. "You were supposed to let me handle it. You gave it to the wrong glass," Martin shouted. "This isn't the first time you've done this," he added, voice shaking. Ezra watched the footage 3 times. Not just confirmation evidence, of intent, of past actions, and most damningly of Martin's knowledge. The next file was dated 2 days later. The two of them were arguing again in the living room. "He knows what you did," Martin said. "So what?" Lorraine snapped. "It's his word against mine. Tessa will never choose him over her family. And if she does," she added coldly, "then she's not the daughter I raised. Don't worry. I've already started planting doubts, gently mentioning their issues. By the time I'm finished, she'll be filing for divorce and thinking it was her own decision." Ezra slammed his laptop shut, his hands trembling. This wasn't just about resentment anymore. It was a methodical attempt to control Tessa's life, cutting out anyone who didn't fit their vision, and they had been doing it for years. He called Camille immediately. "Why did you send this to me?" he asked. "Because they did the same thing to me when I married Miles," she said softly. "Tried to sabotage us for 2 years. Told him I wasn't good enough. Nearly broke us. Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Miles doesn't know," she admitted. "He worships his father, thinks everything he says is gospel." I tried to explain, but he thought I was just being dramatic. I couldn't watch them do it again to someone else. The very next day, Ezra received a text from Martin. "We should talk." Man to man. No wives. They met at the country club. Martin was already seated in a private lounge sipping bourbon. "Ezra," he began, "family matters are complicated. My wife can be difficult, overprotective, but she means well." "Drugging someone and is meaning well?" Ezra asked. Martin waved his hand. "A misunderstanding. Lorraine's on medication for anxiety. She probably got the glasses mixed up." "I have the security footage, Martin." The older man's face shifted in an instant from composed to cold. "What do you want?" he said sharply. "Money, is that what this is? I always suspected you were in this for financial reasons." Ezra didn't flinch. "I want you both to leave us alone. Stop trying to make Tessa believe I'm not good enough. Stop interfering in our marriage." Martin leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You think this is the first time we've had to deal with someone like you? Leeching off our family name? Tessa always comes home. She always has." He smirked. "Ask her about Daniel, the fiancé before you." Ezra felt the room grow colder. "What are you talking about? She was engaged before she met you." "A good man, doctor. We didn't like where he came from. Took us 6 months to convince her he wasn't right. She broke it off, cried in my arms. History repeats, son." On the drive home, Ezra called Bethany, Tessa's former college roommate. "Oh God," Bethany said, "Daniel. That was awful. He was everything she wanted. Her parents hated him, said he was hiding things. They even planted fake emails, made it look like he was cheating. He tried to explain, but she didn't believe him. The pattern was now undeniable. This wasn't just about Ezra. It was about domination, complete control over Tessa's life. And her parents had done it before. Ezra didn't confront her right away. Instead, he built his case. He contacted Daniel, who was hesitant at first. But after Ezra explained, Daniel sent archived emails messages showing how Lorraine and Martin had chipped away at the relationship piece by piece. Ezra then reached out to others, old friends of Tessa's who had drifted away over the years. A pattern emerged. Every person who nurtured her independence had been carefully removed from her life. Camille shared more security footage conversations between Lorraine and Martin recorded without their knowledge. Once they're divorced, she'll move back home, Martin said in one. She can run the foundation. We'll introduce her to the right kind of men. Ezra compiled everything, emails, footage, testimonies into a single drive. Then he invited Miles and Camille over for dinner. He didn't tell Tessa what was coming. Over dessert, he connected his laptop to the television. There's something I need you both to see. For the next hour, they sat in silence watching. Tessa's face was pale, lips trembling. Miles kept muttering, "That's not my parents. That's not them." When the last video ended, Tessa turned to Ezra, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I needed you to see it for yourself," Ezra said gently. "All of it. Not just what they've done to me, but what they've done to you, your whole life." Miles stood up, rage breaking through his shock. "This is fake. You edited these videos," Miles said, his voice shaky. "My parents wouldn't do this." Camille gently rested a hand on his arm. "They did it to us too, Miles. Why do you think they suddenly accepted me after James was born? A grandchild meant leverage." The color drained from his face. "You never told me I tried," she whispered. "You didn't want to hear it." That night, Tessa slid into bed beside Ezra. Her voice was soft. "I need time to process all of this, but I believe you, and I'm sorry I doubted you." The next morning, Lorraine called. Tessa answered and put the call on speaker. "Darling, I was thinking," Lorraine said in her usual cheerful tone, "maybe you should come stay with us for a bit. Your father and I are worried. Marriage is hard, and sometimes a little space brings clarity." Mom, Tessa said firmly. "I've seen the footage." A pause. "What footage?" "The security videos of you drugging Ezra's drink, of you and Dad plotting to destroy our marriage." Another pause, then Lorraine's voice turned icy. "Whatever he's shown you has been doctored. You know, Ezra has always been jealous of our closeness as a family." "Stop," Tessa cut in. Her tone was unshakable. "We're coming over tonight. All of us, Miles, Camille, Ezra, and me. We're going to talk about this. No more lies." After the call, she turned to Ezra. "They'll deny everything. They'll spin it. Try to blame you." "I know," Ezra said quietly. "So what's our plan?" For the first time in weeks, he smiled. "It's time your parents met the real me. The one who doesn't just take photos. He tells stories." That night they returned to Martin and Lorraine's house. Ezra carried his camera gear. Miles and Camille were already seated stiffly in the living room. Martin greeted them confidently. "I understand there's been some sort of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Ezra replied, unfolding a tripod. "I'm documenting this conversation for the family archive." Lorraine immediately objected. "This is private, family business." "Exactly," Ezra said, locking the lens in place, "and I'm family." "Even though you've tried very hard to erase that, for 2 straight hours they laid it all bare. The drug drink, the manipulation, Daniel, the trail of broken relationships, the decades-long pattern of control." Martin and Lorraine denied everything, of course, called Ezra unstable, accused him of manipulation. But for each denial, Ezra had a clip, an email, a quote. With every revelation, their confidence cracked, their lies thinned. Finally, Tessa stood. "I love you both. You're my parents. But what you've done is unforgivable. You don't get to control me anymore." Miles stood too. "We're adults now. We choose our own partners, our own lives." Lorraine started crying, not out of guilt, but from the realization that she no longer held the reins. Martin just looked stunned, unable to process that his children were defying him. As they prepared to leave, Ezra handed Martin a USB drive. "This contains everything. Footage, emails, testimonies. It's yours to keep." "What's that supposed to mean?" Martin asked suspiciously. "It means I'm not out to ruin your name. That would hurt Tessa, and I'd never do that." But Ezra's voice sharpened. "If you ever try to sabotage our marriage again, or poison her against me, copies go out to every one of your golf buddies, your business contacts, and your precious social circle." For the first time since they'd met, Martin looked at Ezra with something like respect. "I underestimated you." "Yes, Ezra said calmly. You did. 6 months passed. Tessa and Miles began therapy to untangle the emotional wreckage their parents had left behind. Lorraine and Martin stayed distant, sending the occasional text, but never overstepping the boundaries that had been clearly drawn. Then came the holidays. An invitation arrived, a fresh start. It read, Tessa wanted to go. They're still my parents, she said gently. And I think they're trying. Ezra agreed, but he wasn't naive. He didn't expect miracles. When they arrived, everything seemed normal. Lorraine had cooked an elaborate meal. Martin greeted them warmly, asking Ezra about his photography projects with what seemed like genuine interest. After dinner, Martin invited Ezra into his study. I have a proposition for you, he said, pouring a generous scotch. I've been thinking about your career. Photography has treated you well, I suppose, but have you ever thought about diversifying? Ezra raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I could bring you into my firm. Martin continued smoothly. Junior partner, track. Salary would be significant. Ezra accepted the glass but didn't drink. Why would you offer me that? He asked. Because you're family. Martin said, his voice as polished as ever. And I respect the way you handled the recent unpleasantness. You stood your ground while protecting my daughter. That's what a real man does. Ezra set the drink on the desk untouched. I appreciate the offer, he said, but no. Martin's smile thinned and Ezra, be reasonable. This is an olive branch. A way to move forward, Ezra said again. It's another attempt to control me. You still think everything has a price, but Haley loves me for who I am, and you can't stand that. Martin's eyes darkened. Don't be naive, he hissed, the mask slipping. Everyone has a price, Ezra stood. That's where you're wrong, and that's why you'll never truly understand your daughter. He walked back into the dining room where Lorraine was flipping through old photo albums with Tessa. Look at this one, she said, smiling. You were so happy living at home. Tessa glanced up and met Ezra's eyes. Something unspoken passed between them. She stood, Mom, Dad, she said clearly, drawing all eyes. I have something to share. Everyone turned toward her. We're having a baby, she announced. Ezra and I were 3 months along. The shock on their faces was real. Lorraine recovered first, leaping up to hug her daughter, tears glistening. Martin moved more slowly, glancing from Tessa to Ezra. Congratulations, he said, his tone controlled. Thank you, Ezra replied. Then leaning in just enough for Martin to hear. This child will never be a pawn in your games, I promise you that. Martin's expression hardened, but he gave a single nod. He understood. That night on the drive home, Tessa reached for Ezra's hand and squeezed it. They'll never change, will they? No, Ezra said quietly. But they'll have to accept that we have. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived from Martin's attorney. Inside were legal documents. The deed to the house Ezra and Tessa had been renting, and paperwork establishing a trust fund for their unborn child. There was no note, no message, no strings, just signatures, just a transfer of assets. It wasn't an apology. Martin wasn't capable of that, but it was an acknowledgement, a silent admission that they had lost. And Ezra and Tessa had won. Their daughter was born in summer. They named her Eliza after Ezra's grandmother. When Martin and Lorraine visited the hospital, they brought expensive gifts, took polite photos, and kept a respectful distance. There were no lectures, no warnings, no snide remarks about finances or parenting methods. Time passed. Their relationship settled into something that looked on the surface like peace. They never said sorry, but they never interfered again. No more manipulation, no more whispered doubts. Ezra continued building his photography studio. Tessa thrived in her work and motherhood, and Eliza grew surrounded by love, laughter, and freedom. One evening, as Ezra was editing portraits in his studio, Tessa walked in, baby. Eliza nestled in her arms. Tessa's phone rang. She glanced down at the screen. It's my mother, she said softly. She wants us to come for Christmas. Ezra looked up from his computer. What do you want to do? Tessa sat for a moment thinking. I think we should go, she said at last. But with conditions, she began counting them off on her fingers. We stay in a hotel, not their house. We leave when we want, and there's no unsupervised time with Eliza. Ezra nodded. Sounds reasonable. She settled beside him, gently bouncing their daughter in her arms. You know, she said, her voice quieter now. I used to think success meant making my parents proud, getting their approval, meeting their expectations. She looked down at Eliza, then back at Ezra. But now I think it means making choices I can be proud of, standing by the people who love me, who choose me. 2 weeks before Christmas, a large envelope arrived. It was from Martin. Inside was a polished brochure, his firm's annual report, Ezra's photographs were featured across the pages, sweeping landscapes, detailed architectural shots, striking portraits. Work he had done on his own terms. No creative interference, no control, just his name in the credits. There was a short note attached. Hired the best photographer I know. Thought you'd want a copy, M. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was something. Respect, maybe, or an acknowledgement finally that Ezra had built something of his own and that he hadn't needed Martin to do it. Ezra didn't call to thank him. This wasn't about gratitude. It was about understanding the silent kind that comes when boundaries are finally respected and reality is finally seen for what it is that spring. Ezra opened his own gallery in downtown Sedona. The grand opening was packed. Tessa stood beside him. Eliza perched on her hip. Ezra's parents had flown in from Oregon. Friends, clients, fellow artists. They all filled the space, laughing, admiring, remembering. Martin and Lorraine arrived late, just as the evening was winding down. They didn't stay long. Lorraine cradled Eliza for a moment under Tessa's watchful eye. Martin shook Ezra's hand, glanced at the photographs with what appeared to be genuine appreciation, and importantly said nothing about how to improve the display. He didn't offer advice, he didn't offer conditions, just a simple nod of acknowledgement. As Ezra locked the gallery doors that night, the air outside smelled of desert rain and new beginnings. Tessa turned to him. "Do you think they've changed, Ezra?" Ezra looked up at the stars above Sedona, then back at her. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but we have, and maybe that's enough." Ezra considered the question carefully. "No," he said at last, "but they have accepted that they can't change us, and sometimes that's enough." Later, that night, he and Tessa sat on the porch, the warm desert breeze brushing past them as the stars emerged over the red cliffs of Sedona. Upstairs, Eliza slept peacefully in her crib. And in that quiet moment, Ezra realized something he had never fully put into words. He hadn't won by beating Martin and Lorraine at their own game. He'd won by refusing to play it. He had stood his ground, protected what mattered, and built a life defined not by manipulation or status, but by integrity, by love, by steady, quiet persistence, not through schemes, not through revenge, but through resilience. Through living well on his own terms with the family he cherished at his side. In the end, that was the truest victory of all.